I am honored to have Paul Van Meter, founder of ProShop ERP in Bellingham, Washington. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Thanks, Noah. It's great to be here with you.
Thank you. Today we are talking about ERP system and um, and setup time, a specific topic.
Yeah,
And how an ERP can do that. Um, we'll get a little differentiation between some different ERP systems too, but um, it's still a newer thing for me. I know I've talked to quite a few people now on the podcast that have mentioned it, and now I want to delve deeper into it. So, first, I just want to talk a little bit about ProShop and an ERP, and get your 5 minute life story, and then we're gonna we're gonna jump into setting up a machine, which everybody, 95% of the people listening to this podcast
do that.
would care about.
Right. Yeah. Do it or care about it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
As a
maybe
stakeholder, is a stakeholder in machine setups.
maybe 80% of the people, but
Right.
a good amount. So, first of all, Paul, uh, tell us a little bit about ProShop, the story, and I know that that's sort of wrapped around your own personal story. Give us the spin.
Sure. Yeah. So I guess it started way back. I started in college going to an engineering program, mechanical engineering, which I found pretty dry and kind of boring, to be honest. And so I just happened to run across an article about this more hands-on kind of manufacturing engineering based program out here in Washington State, because I actually grew up on the East Coast near New York City.
Oh, okay.
And anyway, so I came out to this program, absolutely fell in love with it. For those that might be listening, it was heavily into the Formula SAE competition. So I don't know if you've heard of that yourself, but it's a engineering competition hosted by SAE, Society of Automotive Engineers, and dozens of engineering schools and
Is that
colleges
the
around the.
autonomous car thing?
No, that one's not. They hold a few different types of competitions. This one is basically designing and building a small race car, and then you go compete against other colleges and universities. And
Wow.
lived and breathed it for 3 years. Absolutely loved it. And but fell in love with machining and manufacturing during the same time. And my partners in on the team, we decided to start a machine shop right out of college, rather than going our separate ways. And so one of my partners, guys on the team, he'd come back to school. He was a little bit older. He owned a house, which most college students don't own, but he owned a house, and that house had enough equity to take out a second mortgage, which was enough money to buy a Haas VF4 and start paying a few months of rent and a manual mill and a lathe. And so that's what we did. He took out that second mortgage. We started our company basically straight out of college, and
Wow, very cool.
started
And
knocking on doors and trying to find work.
I see. And for the first few years, you were kind of old school, uh, didn't have any like official set automated system, correct?
We we used Excel to make basically our job routers and travelers. We didn't make them and print them. We made them and kept them digital, because we put a well, when we started, we had one machine, so we put a computer right next to the machine. And then as we added more machines, we would put a computer next to each of those machines also. And so when someone was at a machine, they would just open up Excel, open up the workbook for that work order. But we would have different tabs on the workbook uh, for the job router, for our inspection process, for our tool list, for our setup notes. You know,
Oh,
uh,
and when was that?
all
How long ago?
we started that company in '97.
Okay.
And so for the
So,
first 3 years, we used Excel.
and
And
even though it was 1997, computers were fast enough to do that. I mean, it's
oh,
just
sure, yeah,
Excel, I guess.
yeah,
Yeah.
they were like 486s or Pentium, the
Yeah.
first Pentium
486.
machines.
So,
Uh,
so then what was the catalyst that made you go, all right, we can do better than this. Let's come up with a system?
it was just out of desperation and need. So when we were about 3 years old, we had probably a dozen employees and maybe 5 or 6 machines at that time, and Excel was just not keeping up. Right? It was just, job shops are so dynamic. Always revs are changing, and think people are needing to do stuff, and we're needing to like make edits to the same workbook at the same time, and you can't because someone else is using it. And so we started just doing research on ERP software, shop management software.
Okay.
And early days of the internet, this was 2000, so we were 3 years old. um, and I think we mostly looked in like the Thomas Register, the big set of green books.
Yeah.
We pulled that down off the shelf and started looking through the software categories
That's kind
and
of
called.
ironic looking in the Thomas Register for software.
Yeah, it is a little ironic.
You weren't
So
Googling it? Google wasn't powerful enough, or Yahoo?
yeah, whatever it was back then. Um, yeah, what was the Ask Jeeves, or there
Oh,
was so many.
yeah. I like Ask
Anyway,
Jeeves.
um, so yeah, we had some software companies come and give us demos. Their salespeople physically traveled to our location and gave us demos. Um, and we knowing nothing about ERP, right? Keep in mind we're straight out of college, straight into business, and we were not business people. We were all engineer type people. So we had no idea, even what we were looking at. So we were excited when they bring them in, and we'd say, all right, cool, show us how your system works. And they'd start showing us, how to put in orders and how to make estimates and how to make invoices. And we're like, okay, that's great. Show us how you manage the shop floor. Show us your work instructions. Show us your inspection sheets. And they were all of them. We're like, no, we don't do that.
Ah.
And we're like, wait a minute, I thought you have special software for running a machine shop.
So this
You
was the
know,
stuff for the office,
it
but
was the
not,
stuff for the office.
which is
And then you could,
important, but
it is, of course, you got to run the office organized. But what makes money in a manufacturing company?
uh I mean, I guess machines.
Machines
Yeah.
make money. Yeah. I mean, you got to bring the business in with your salespeople and the office, but it's the actual in a machine shop. It's the machines. It's the making chips that makes you the money. And
I guess
so,
it's kind of like a sports team where the management would say the management wins, and then the athletes would say no, we're responsible for it. But
sure.
yeah,
And it is a team. It requires all the parts working together to work well. But ultimately, it's the machines that make you the money. And so
hmm,
we were kind of flabbergasted when none of the software that's designed for shop management actually did shop management. We
sure.
were like, so if we buy one of your softwares, then we'll be kind of going backwards in functionality compared to what we're doing in Excel. And they're designed to be paper based. So you're supposed to print off the job routers once you've put them in the office.
It was
And then
less. It was less. It was less productive than Excel.
we sure thought so.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, they were designed to print paper routers. And then when the inevitable changes came from the customer on rev or due date or quantity or anything, you'd have to go find the router, replace it, print a new one, mark it up with a pen, something, right?
Okay.
And we were just like, this is crazy. We're not going to do this. So we started looking, and we hired a software developer instead to just build something for ourselves.
Okay. So then, how long did it take to come up with something that was useful? Pretty quick, huh?
it was within the first year that we had, 6, 9 months, I don't remember exactly, where we had the basics of a system that would allow us to make work orders and keep track of the things that we needed to keep track of. Um, but it was definitely bare bones at the beginning for sure.
Right, right. Okay, and then fast forward, like what, 14 years, and then
Not quite that far yet. So fast forward about 8 years.
okay.
Um, our biggest machine shop customer, this was right around 2008 and the slowdown there.
Mm.
So our biggest machine shop customer, um, they were a little slow, and so their production manager came and worked for us on Fridays because they were running a 410 shift or something, and he wanted to earn some extra money, and so he came and worked for us, just setting up machines, running machines, and and he used ProShop, of course, to do all that. So he'd go to set up a job, he'd pull up the work instructions in ProShop, he'd set up the job, he'd do his first article buy off in ProShop, then he'd run parts in ProShop and track his in-process inspection and all his work instructions. Um, and so he was loving it, and he went back to the owners of his company and he said, "You guys have got to see the system they're using."
Now
They were using a
you hadn't sold it to anybody. It was
we were
just
not we were
something
not
you were
intending to
using for
sell it.
yourself.
Yeah, we had no intentions of selling it to
Did you
anybody.
consider it like your unfair advantage to beat the competition, or you just were,
We
yeah?
certainly did. Yeah, yeah. Um, I mean, I guess it took us a few years to understand, and it was very organic. Over those 8 years, we started. We got ISO certified in 2004, so we built all the modules for managing ISO. We got AS9100 certified in 2006, so we added a bunch more functionality that's required by AS9100, which is the aerospace standard,
Mm-hmm.
quality standard. So yeah, I mean, kind of organic, I guess, but yeah, we knew it was certainly helping us grow and scale very quickly. We were growing a lot in those years and keeping it all pretty manageable. Anyway, so they approached us and said, "Hey, we'd like you to sell us ProShop," and we were like, "No, we'll keep making parts for you."
This is part of our secret sauce. We don't want to.
And we're not a software company. We don't know how to do that, you know. Anyway, they convinced us. We decided, sure, let's give it a try, and
Did they pay you
we had
for it?
they did, yep,
Okay.
they did, um, and it was none of us expected how big an improvement it was going to make for them. Like, it was dramatic. It was dramatic. They had about
What
35 people.
company was this, or what kind of company?
Their name is South Aero Marine. They're an aerospace OEM manufacturer of interior galley components and cabinet latches and other interior aircraft hardware.
Wow.
So
Okay.
they had their own internal machine shop and a big assembly shop because almost all their products are fully assembled, components. Um, but then they outsourced a lot of machining work to companies like ours. Um,
Okay. Okay.
anyway, so they had about 35 people at the time, and the typical distribution of overhead staff and then a bunch of manufacturing staff. Probably a little heavier on the office side because they also had design engineers that would design all their hardware, and new parts. Um, but they freed up 3 overhead people within the first few months of putting ProShop in.
Yeah.
They freed up 2 full-time expediters and a full-time planning position that they just didn't need doing those things anymore.
Did they
Um,
fire those people, or did they
no,
just sort
they
of
incorporated them
repurpose?
in. They repurposed them into more value-added roles.
That makes total sense.
They were still growing, and then they had a perpetual late order list that was like 6 pages long, um, for many reasons. They had some very crazy, super long outside process lead times. 12 weeks to get a special gold-plated brush finish on this custom latch that would go into a corporate jet, kind of a thing. And some of those would still, they're always late because the outside processing was also always so long. But they basically pared down that list down to, half a dozen, items within the first few months.
Okay, so you
So they
changed their life, and then um, so then you sold it to a few other people.
they started asking. They asked us, could we introduce you to some of our other machine shop vendors,
It
your
sounds
competitors?
like a pyramid.
Well, it was, yeah, it kind of does. No, it was other vendors that made machined parts for them that were always late or always had quality problems. And so um, we're like, well, that's our competition, but sure, let's go for it. So we
Yeah.
sold it a couple more times, also with great success. And it was through that period of time where we thought to ourselves, you know what, guys, I think we have a cool opportunity here to help the industry and have a pretty neat business. So
So what is your first love? Are you more now into the software versus making parts, or was it just kind of nice movement in your life to do something different? Uh,
um,
do you miss being in front of a machine? I don't even know if you were in front of a machine, but do you miss the production game?
process. I do, certainly. It was fun to take raw materials and make finished parts and see the beautiful, craftsmanship of it. But no, the thing I've realized that I love the most is helping other companies improve.
Right.
I just absolutely could do that all day, every day. Um,
That's got to
Solving
give
their
you tremendous
problems,
purpose.
it absolutely does. And I think specifically serving the machine shop business or job shops, fabrication shops, um, they are really the kind of foundation level of our economy because every product, looking behind you, the filing cabinet, those binders, the microphone you're using, all of those products started with machining and
Yeah.
fabrication and welding and sheet metal um, and so helping those companies thrive is crucially important.
Well, this microphone I'm using, I'm sure most of it was made in China or Asia or something, likely. So,
Very likely, yes.
are they using ERP systems there? You think maybe
The
they're
more
not using
sophisticated
yours yet?
companies are. No, no, we don't sell in China. But yeah, the more sophisticated companies are certainly using ERP.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, wow, very interesting. And then, so 4 years ago, you started
Yep.
just going straight
Yep.
up.
In
Okay,
2016, we turned on a website and started looking for customers.
very interesting. Uh, okay, now we're gonna get, um, you know, there's so many aspects that uh, the system can do, and I'd like to probably talk about them in the future. Today,
Hmm.
I want to just get specific into something practical. Hopefully, it can at least be the germ of something people can use. And
Hmm.
that is setting up a machine. Now, when we were talking before this interview, you said something like 50% you could cut a setup time, possibly, um,
Hmm.
on a machine.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
tell me how that would be possible.
Sure. Well, let's start by looking at what many, and that number is highly variable based on how
Sure.
sophisticated a shop starts out as, and you see everything under the sun, quite
Right. It's
honestly.
different kinds of machines. I mean, you might have
Oh, yeah.
something really fancy. You might have a lathe or a fab machine or something.
Yeah. But so I'm talking primarily CNC machines, lathes, vertical mills, horizontal mills, 5-axis mills,
What about
Swiss
a,
machines.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, sure.
What about it like a cam multi-spindle screw machine or something like that?
Absolutely.
Same principle.
Still applies. Still, yeah, the principles apply.
Okay. Okay.
Um, and so the biggest variable in how much time there is to save is what companies are doing today, right? What they're starting with. And so and I want to also uh, when people talk about setup time, there's a couple of different things they could be talking about. They could be talking about how long it takes you when you walk up to a machine and start, you know, setting up the job you're supposed to set up until you have your first good part bought off by quality and you're starting to actually run production.
Okay. That's
So
what
that's
I think
probably,
of when I think of
yeah,
setup. Getting
yeah,
this machine to do what you need it to do and starting from sort of a blank canvas.
right. But there's some work that happens before that. Well, there's lots of work that obviously happens before that, but even on the machine itself, in a lot of shops, setup starts with tearing down the last job.
Uh-huh. Right, because you
Um,
got a lot of tooling to take out
yeah,
and
yep. And we think that the breakdown of the last job needs to be associated with the last job, not with the setup of your next job,
okay. So
right?
the canvas
So
is
the
clean.
canvas is clean, which could mean you've cleared out all the tools, or it could mean you've just cleared out the ones that you need to clear out, and the ones you still need are going to be left in the machine.
Okay.
If you have common, you know, a shared common tool libraries that you use for basic stuff, and then you have some specialty tools to add for specific part numbers and jobs.
And I'm sure your process could also speed up the clearing the canvas aspect as well. Could go either way.
I mean, we have tools to document and outline the breakdown process. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Um,
Okay. So you're walking up to your, let's say, your star um, sliding headstock,
mhm.
and you got a new job, uh, pretty intricate part, um, and you're the setup guy, and now it's like, all right, how is ProShop or using an ERP system or the principles of an ERP system? How is
Mhm.
this going to cut my setup time?
Well, most ERP systems won't help with that because they don't get involved in that part of the process, as we kind of talked a little bit about earlier, right? They help in the office, and then you print your job router, and that's what goes to the machine.
But there are a
Um,
few competitors are
that we have.
that are kind of similar.
I mean, yes, but
Okay.
most of them, vast majority of them, still don't get involved in the manufacturing process.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So the ones that we were researching back in 2000, those ones are still the primary, most widely used ones, and they still do not get involved in the manufacturing process today.
What are those? I mean, you don't have to name them, but I mean,
Um, well, the two I'll name them because they're the most widely used and all
sure.
shops know them. Job Boss and E2 would
Okay.
probably be our two biggest competitors.
And they're not so much on the floor like you, or are they not on the floor at all?
They're on the floor in a very small way where they can track time. So you can track time on jobs and you can say what you've finished. Like I've finished 100 parts off the mill and it
Okay.
took me 4 hours. So that's the level of interaction that they would typically have.
Okay.
Um, but as far as helping you do that setup and knowing what tools to be using and having a checklist or any of those other things that could be useful, they just don't get involved in that.
Okay. So you have ProShop, it's helping you organize, or you don't have ProShop, but you want to at least
Well,
think
yeah,
about
let's
these aspects.
sure. I want to start kind of painting the picture of what it, and maybe this is a little bit of a worst case scenario.
Okay.
Someone walks up to a machine with a print or with a job router, and they're like, okay, I have to set up this machine. And then they go and they find the material they need and they go look through, you know, the tool they probably have a tool list from their CAM system and they start go retrieving cutting tools, right? And then they load them up into holders and they do all this stuff and then they start proving out they load up their G code, they start proving out the part, they might do some inspection on a paper form, right? Documenting, hey, this 3-inch dimension is plus or minus 5 thousandths, and I'm within two. So, you know, they do all that stuff, right? And then they send it into the quality department, and they buy it off, and then they finally get approval to run production. But what often happens is when that person walks up to that machine, one of the first things they do is they leave the machine again to go find things.
Ah,
That's one of the killers.
I
Um,
remember Machine Metrics was talking about that too. That
sure.
was one of the big culprits.
Oh yeah, it's huge, super huge, and
So they don't have their stuff ready, and
they don't have
then
their
they're
stuff
going to
ready.
have to go and get something else or go to the bathroom or
And they get distracted on the way to the tool crib, and they start talking to their buddy about, whatever.
solving
Um,
another problem that somebody else is having.
yeah, hey, yeah, exactly. Can you take a look at this with me? So what our goal is that and by the way, the worst case is they go to find a tool and they don't have the tool in the company. And this UPS makes so much money off of machine shops that overnight tools in. It's crazy. So constantly overnighting tools, overnighting a special thread gauge you thought you might have but you don't have, or whatever. You just didn't even think about it. Um, and that's even so your machine is now sitting all night, all the rest of your day until UPS comes. You probably got it early
Mm,
AM delivery just so you can start back up first thing in the morning.
we can totally relate here. Yeah, at Graph Pinker, you'd be horrified, I think. Okay, so
So,
first step
so
is having everything there ready. Don't have to be ordering anything at all. Just you're not going to have to get up. You're not going to have to order.
right.
Period.
The goal is to walk up to the machine with everything you need and not leave the machine until you have a fully good part in your hand.
Okay, and
That's the
having the
goal.
tools ready is the first thing.
Yep. And then having really good work instructions. That's the other key component. A lot of setup sheets have a tool list and some basic descriptions from the programmer about, the zero is in this upper right corner and it's on the surface of the stock, or in your case, it's obviously it's center of the, center of the material and on the face of the bar, or where, wherever it is.
Sure, sure.
Um, and but there's just text, right? And there's a lot of interpretation very likely there. Um, and
So you're
exactly how
talking
the
about blueprints and like,
well, it gets to that. I mean, the work instructions is usually a paper document that's created by the programming department,
okay,
right? That's some standalone thing unrelated to the ERP system. And it
okay,
might be, hopefully, it's at the right revision level of what they're making. Could be oftentimes when you have a paper-based system, shops will put, their paper documents into a file folder or into a sleeve, a paper clear plastic sleeve, right? And then at the end of the job, it goes into a filing cabinet, hopefully complete. And then next time you get the same job again, if it's a repeat job, you pull
okay,
that package out and send it back out to the shop. But you could have, you know, pages and pages of scribbled notes and possibly old revision drawings and old revision work instructions. So it's definitely possible and likely in many cases that you might be working off of old information.
okay. So the first step is to have like your stuff together. Have the good, have the tools all laid out, have it ready, and then all the tooling is ordered because you've already looked at the plans. Okay,
Yep. Yep.
and that is to prevent one of the things to prevent getting up from the machine.
Yep.
Okay, next step.
Or making the wrong part or the old rev part. Like that's the worst, right?
Oh yeah,
I mean,
and then you
talk
got to
about a waste of
rewind.
time. Yeah, you got to do it all over again. Anyway, so super logical, like just pretty basic concepts, but still a very big challenge for a lot of shops, partly because their software doesn't support that at all. And
And
so,
so with your system, you wouldn't be getting a sheet. You'd be getting it all like sent via computer on the
right,
cloud. And
yeah, you'd have a computer or some kind of device, tablet or something, right there mounted at the machine, or maybe you bring it over on a laptop. Just depends. But yes, a device um, that you're getting everything from. It's got your tool list, it's got your work instructions, which could be videos and photos, obviously, and those are
Right. And that's one of the things that you guys, that's like another value or another feature you guys do, right? That you're into having video and other sort of media to guide
yeah,
the
rich
people.
media work instructions. Yeah.
Is there, um, my assumption is you don't have this yet, but are you planning to like integrate it with the PLC on a machine?
We are. Yeah.
That'll be
Yeah.
really cool.
It will be. Yeah, I can't wait. Yeah, we plan on doing that both natively as well as integrating with other systems like Machine Metrics or
Yeah.
Factory Wiz or some of those IoT kind of platforms through an API.
Okay, so we got having all the stuff ready, having the plans ready, making sure people, and so making sure people do it right, and making sure people don't leave the machine.
Hmm.
Um, and then anything else? I remember we were talking before, and I really like this analogy or metaphor you said. You don't want every setup to be a home cooked meal.
Hmm. Right. Well, that's, yeah, when you don't have everything ready, it starts to become a home cooked meal. And then if you have tribal knowledge, right? Joe is the guy that normally sets this job up, but he's gone or sick or retired or whatever. So someone else is trying to figure it out from scratch and they don't know the history of it. And they're trying to look through the paper notes and they're trying to look through the G code to see what it says and where, um, and that's really when it becomes kind of, or has the potential to really go off the rails in
I
terms of
see.
how much time it's taking to kind of figure it all out again.
And you think it could have that much, uh, just doing these really simple things could make that much difference, that 50%, you think?
Oh yeah, I mean, clients tell us all the time our setup times are cut in half.
And they're
Yeah.
probably right more often. Well, I guess that
Oh
cuts it.
yeah, yeah. First part yield definitely higher, um, because there's more nuances to all this. But yeah, the things that you need to do to make sure, hopefully get your first part off as a good part, or at least a lot closer. So you're only dialing in a few tolerances a little bit here and there. Um, yeah. And so then the next kind of step would be
Okay.
to actually do the inspection,
Ah,
right? Do
yes.
your first part buy off, your first article inspection. And you can do that right in ProShop. And most ERPs don't do that. It's up to you to do it on paper, do it in Excel, some other database, and we've
But
just
the
integrated
person in the quality room is using ProShop, or can the person at the machine check it
both.
because they
Both.
have?
Yeah, I mean, in our shop, the way we did it in our shop was the setup person would certainly be qualified enough to check their own work.
Yeah.
So they were trained to a high enough level through our training module to do that. That was documented for QMS purposes. Um, so when an auditor comes and says, "How do you know this person is able to do quality verification or inspections?" You can show the training records right there. But yeah, so usually the setup person will check their own work, put their results into that sort of first column of inspection results. ProShop will analyze the results as they put them in to tell them if they're good, close to the limit, or bad, um, and then possibly make NCRs, nonconformance reports, if that's necessary. But then once they feel like they have a good part, then they can submit it into the quality department or have a peer come do a double check with them. So that's really up to subjectivity of the shop and how complex their parts are, how skilled their setup people are, and just what their formal process, documented process is. But um, so again, normally they would possibly do that on paper or some other spreadsheet, and with our clients they do it right in ProShop, and the inspection department can see that they have some inspections they need to do, and it's all just kept in one system, which is nice.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you plan, we spoke a little bit about this before, but It seems like something that could be done with blockchain, just to have things be very clear from one step to the next and not get
I think
screwed up.
yeah, I'm still fuzzy on exactly how blockchain is and works, but I think the greatest possibility there is making sure that what you're getting from clients and flowing down to vendors is really well controlled. I think inside the company, I don't see quite as much, but again, I have just a very, very rudimentary understanding of what it is,
Yeah,
to be
watch
honest.
that. You gotta take a look at the podcast we did with the blockchain
That's
guy.
right. That's right. That's on my list. Yeah, we did
Uh,
talk about that.
um, to me, this sounds like something that could really work with coordinating with another shop that you're outsourcing to, because you're giving them like a very set, detailed plan
Hmm.
with checkpoints. And is this something that you guys are working towards or you're doing now?
Well, you make yeah, you make a really good point. Part of what that sort of originates with is what we call routing methods. So, if a shop normally makes their own parts, right? So when you make a work order, that work order has your machining operations, your internal manufacturing operations, assuming you're building it to order, building it to inventory. But it's very often the case that a shop is too busy or their machine went down, so they need to offload it to another shop. And in ProShop, you can have multiple routing methods associated with any given part number. So you could just go in, change the routing to be an outsourced routing, and it
Mm-hmm.
will remove it off your machine schedules, queue it up for purchasing department to buy it from that other shop. Um, what we don't have yet, I mean, that other shop would need to use ProShop, if
Okay.
they were gonna do that.
But if they were
Um,
using ProShop because you're both on the cloud, uh,
so yeah, the ability to transfer records between ProShop systems is something that we are working on. It's not in place today.
very
To
interesting.
say, yeah, here's the plan. Here's our inspection plan. Here's you know, our setup notes and sheets and pictures. Now, assuming that your outsourced vendor is using the same or a very similar kind of machine, right? More or less of that information would be relevant. The inspection plan would probably be highly relevant. The actual work instructions, maybe not as much, depending on what machine they're doing it on.
Right. Right. That's true. Maybe they're, like maybe you're doing it on Swiss machines and you're going too damn slow and you're like, all right, well, this guy has an index, so
Right.
he can do the work of five machines.
Sure. Yep.
Um, so in
But
that case,
the setup looks totally different on that machine.
sure, it's a different animal, but the same specs on the part could be passed over.
Yeah, the same
And
drawing, approved drawing, revision, the same, yeah, inspection plan. Yep.
very interesting.
And the inspection plan might vary a little bit because you might make features in a slightly different order depending on how you're attacking the part. And inspection plans are tightly associated with your manufacturing process because you're not ideally checking it at the end when the part's totally finished. Although on an index machine like that, of course, it's coming off complete every few seconds or whatever. But in a setup where a semi-finished part is coming out of a machine, getting checked, and going back into a machine to finish it
Oh,
off, that's where if you're machining it from this end first versus this end first, that might change the way you inspect it.
right, right. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Um, well, it sounds awfully game changing. This is a little bit more. So, first, is this are these all of the aspects that come to mind when you think of chopping the setup
Setup
time, or is
reduction?
there
No, there's
anything
more.
else?
Yeah, there's more.
Wait, there's more. Okay.
There is more. So a big part of hopefully every shop is continuous improvement,
Okay.
right? You have a job that you set up a certain way. You have this G code that runs the part in so many minutes or seconds, right? And but there's almost always opportunity to improve it, right? So one of the key features we have is what we call process development. And basically it allows machinists to document process improvement ideas and flag their planning department, create action items from that, assign them to people. Oh, here's an idea to reduce the setup by making a new fixture, right, or a certain jig or something. And so, okay, great, we're going to do that. We're going to assign that to Mary, and Bob's going to also look at this aspect of
I see.
things.
Because you're
So
saying that the person on the machine is able to see things that the engineer isn't. And
right,
that's
because they're
why,
right there in the process, they see it clearly. Here's something that's low hanging fruit that if we did this, we could save
right.
10% of our cycle time,
So it goes
right?
back in the cloud with that data, and then all the
And
communication makes things streamlined.
yep, and it's all in one place. So you can go back later and look at what you did. Or you can decide, this is a great idea, but we're not going to implement it on this work order because we're already almost done. Let's do it next time. And if you leave items outstanding, then ProShop will automatically flag you the next time you get an order that, hey, last time we decided we were going to do this thing, right? And so then you could send it back through your manufacturing planning department, make a new fixture, change the G code, reprogram it, whatever it is that you're going to do,
Right.
and improve that process for next time.
Right. And it checks to make sure somebody isn't just saying, screw it, I don't feel like doing it that way.
Right. I mean, you could say the ROI on this improvement idea is not great enough to be worth doing,
Yeah.
right? We could save, 5 seconds of machine time, but we're only making 100 parts. So what's the point in spending an hour to try to do that,
Right.
right? So yeah, that could certainly be one of the resolutions. Not worth doing.
Right. Right. But it's right in front of you because of the
Yep.
whole automation.
Right. Yep.
Very
Um,
interesting. Uh, so just a little bit, this could be a whole nother podcast, what I'm going to ask, but,
okay.
um, I could see it just being like a huge undertaking to get people to embrace the system, get people to learn it. Um,
Hmm.
I'm assuming that a great deal of your resources are used for that.
Yeah, our implementation and training department is about the same size as our development department, and those are the two biggest departments we have.
Interesting.
So, and yes, we have a pretty well-defined implementation process. We actually use ProShop to manage it. So we issue a training implementation work order within our client system that outlines everything they're going to learn, all
That's
the learning
awesome.
objectives, sign-offs on whether we did it well or not. So we use the tool to train on the tool, um, and it's important. Yeah, it's crucially important. The best tool in the world, if you don't know how to use it, is not worth anything.
Are people scared before you? I'm scared of undertaking something that I know is going to like be life changing, like this in our company.
We see the whole range, of this is so exciting, I can't wait to jump in, let's just go, to yeah, just absolute, fear, because and rightfully so, because ERP has a really bad reputation for just being, or ERP transitions or implementations have a terrible reputation for being super painful and super.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think you get different numbers if you research it, but something close to 60% of ERP implementations fail,
Ah, I see. And what percentage of yours?
or over 90% that are successful.
Wow. Over 60% fail.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I was listening to, uh, podcast this morning, this Wired magazine podcast, and they were talking about voting machines in
Mm,
Texas and how like after 2000 with all the chat problems, um there was kind of a movement of people to uh get computer voting systems, and they talked
right.
about this woman in this small town in Texas who she was a big proponent of it, um and but the problem was all of the systems were crap. uh they were all like these private little companies. It was like a gold rush for making
Sure.
and so but there was all these companies that didn't do a very good job, and then there was this um comp sci guy uh in Texas that said, which so ironically he was the one that said, no, this is terrible, you shouldn't use this is counterproductive, people are going to hack it.
Right.
And then they were total enemies for like 12 years or something, maybe more. And then finally, like, it's time for her to buy new voting machines,
Right.
and there wasn't anything good yet. So she then went to him and said, hey, I want to, and he was just flabbergasted. But she's like, I want you to get a team together, and I want to like create a real good machine, um, that's, hacker proof. And they
Right.
worked on it several years, but they couldn't get funding for it because nobody figured it was worth it. And then, of course, after 2016, all of a sudden people are like, oh yeah, well, maybe we should work on that and pay money for it. And so I believe it was the private sector started funding it. And now they say they'll have a machine ready by like 2021, 2022. A little late, but
Better late. Better late than never.
yeah, but it,
It,
it it was
yeah,
fascinating.
the saying that, necessity is the mother of invention is so, so true. It just
Yeah, nobody
is.
cared. Nobody cared.
Right.
It's it. I don't know. The whole thing was so strange, but really interesting. And I interviewed this guy from Brazil for the podcast, and he was bragging about the voting system in Brazil. He's like, we have this computerized voting system, and it's so sophisticated, and we have an election, we know who wins in a couple hours. And I mean, I wonder how good it is, but
Sure.
um, he was pretty enthused about it. A couple more questions. What was one of the most interesting things you learned last week,
Last week, interesting
or
question. I
or
almost
or
have to
this
look at
week?
my
I mean, it could have been
calendar.
today, yesterday,
Um,
recently.
yeah, recently. Most interesting. Put me on the spot. I've been doing a lot of personal development stuff, but that's totally unrelated
It
to
doesn't have to be.
the
It could be
machine shop stuff.
totally. It could be you just saw an interesting movie, or like you had an epiphany about something, whatever.
Well, it's been in the news, the forest fires on the West Coast. Um, and so we did the math ourselves and realized that about 6% of all the forests in California, Washington, and Oregon have burned this year within the last few weeks.
Oh my god.
That's a crazy number.
What was it last year? Was it worse?
It was way, way smaller. I think in California, like there's like,
Last year was way smaller.
yeah, I think they said like, there's been like 20 times greater acreage of fires burned this year than before, than
Oh
last
my
year.
god. Because all you
Yeah.
could hear about it was last year.
Yeah, no, this year there's more than 5 million acres burned, and there's only 30, or I forget, 80 million acres of forests in California, Washington, and Oregon.
Oh my,
Something like that. We looked up each state and did the math and added it, divided by the 5 million acres burned, and
wow. And it's
it's
totally
it's
lost in the shuffle.
yeah, well, yeah. 2020 is hitting us left and right in all sorts of ways, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh my God. No matter what your politics, it's nuts. I really don't watch the news at all, or
Right.
I try to read it very, very little. Well, that awesome. That was something new I learned now. Uh, you have anything else you want to say to the world?
Um, I think, I mean, like I said, we might do another one of these in the future, hopefully.
Absolutely,
But yeah,
absolutely.
talking about setup, I mean, there's a lot of, hopefully, some interesting stuff there. A lot of it's very logical. You can do most of it without specialized software if you just think about it and put some systems in place. But I guess the key takeaway is that many shops that I talk with think that it's not worth doing the upfront work, that it's just too expensive to, you know, document things more thoroughly or do your inspection plan ahead of time, right? A lot of them start looking at their inspection plan right when they're ready to inspect the part,
Yeah,
right? So just the concept of put in the work up front, develop repeatable processes that can eliminate firefighting in the back end. Speaking of fires,
yeah.
a little bit of upfront work will have huge ROI on your time on, the back end of the process. So that's something worth thinking on.
Sure. The long game.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Paul. Um, it's a pleasure.
It
And
has been fun, Noah. Yeah. Thank you.
awesome.